Okay, so let's get started. So Thomas, I pass the call to you.
So, thank you, Madeleine. Apologies again, everyone, for sorry, I have to stop sharing my screen to show you the right presentation now. So indeed, apologies for the small technical issues. So now I'm going to present to you an overview of the European market, the global market for geothermal energy. And first, what we need a bit to know about the global market for geothermal energy is that basically globally what the market looks like is very different from what it looks like in Europe. We have a market across the world that is very much focused on power production. You have here a map of the 10 largest users of geothermal electricity globally, which is based on data collected by Geo-Energy. We can see really the US, countries like Philippines, Indonesia, Mexico, Kenya, etc. Most of their activity on geothermal energy is currently focused on electricity. Turkey in Europe is very much in the same way. But what we are seeing also is that globally we have very different trends compared to Europe. So what we have in Europe is a market of relatively low temperature geothermal resources, which really drives us to be quite innovative to enable the use of these resources. We developed many new technologies. Sometimes we brought them successfully to market, sometimes a bit less so. But what is quite interesting is that we also have in Europe a stable or stagnating electricity demand so far, whereas in other countries, and I notably think about Kenya, Indonesia, Philippines, Turkey, we are seeing an electrification of the economy, which is either due to a growing industrialization of the economy with new industry installing themselves in the country, or in the case especially of Kenya, for instance, we have an electrification that is just providing access to electricity to the population for even covering basic needs. And there, geothermal in the country, for instance, plays a very crucial role in the strategy, since it covers about, I think, 40% of the electricity demand of the country. What we are also seeing globally, and here maybe we are seeing maybe not a catch-up to Europe, but a convergence, is that we are moving towards projects that are better integrated within the community. So the EU, we have very strong environmental regulation. We have also a very strict framework for industrial projects that must be validated basically by communities and local authorities. And we are seeing more and more concerns around these topics being reflected by global developments, even in countries where so far local acceptance was not a major concern because of, let's say, past difficulties. This is now a major concern, with typically more and more projects being developed around low local environmental impacts, etc., etc. And this is an area where, for instance, European technologies are quite competitive for having a few decades of developments. Then what we were also seeing is that globally we have a market for geothermal power production, especially, that is structured very differently than in Europe. So in Europe, very largely, and that also includes Turkey, we have a market where feed-in tariffs are a very important component of the business plan of a geothermal power plant. So if you build your plant, you can just sell your electricity to the grid. You don't really need to care to whom, and you are going to receive a given income that allows you to really be solve your profitability requirements, hopefully. In countries like, for instance, the United States, there is no such schemes. And what you need to do is to secure demand for your plants. Geothermal plants, they are very interesting for also consumer of electricity because they are reliable, they are baseload. They can also be, that's not a very mainstream model, but they can also be optimized for operating flexibly to cover swings, let's say, in demand. And this is increasingly something that is very much sought after in public power purchasing agreements, notably with private companies, but also even with utilities that need to secure a given amount of reliable energy in the face of increasingly variable electricity grid. That's especially true, for instance, in the US, where geothermal power plants are really a core focus of PPAs, and especially PPAs for reliability, for preventing from any disruption in a market where we are seeing a lot of blackouts, brownouts, because typically of things like summer swings in power demand, or even more recently in Texas, where there's not that many geothermal power plants so far, because of winter electricity demand as well. The PPA model so far is not very developed in Europe, especially for electricity, but we are seeing more and more that it could become a model, especially we are moving increasingly towards a discussion in the electricity system, where the reliability of a resource, especially a renewable resource, is a very, very strong argument for investments and creating partnerships. And as well, a model where we are seeing more and more exposure of the private sector in the financing of renewable, including geothermal projects. Now looking a bit at the geothermal heating and cooling market, which is really, as we know, the dominating market for the European geothermal industry. That's where we use most of the geothermal resources, especially in the EU, but that's also true overall in Europe. We have a much higher installed capacity for geothermal heat than for geothermal power. Globally, that is also somewhat true. We have an estimated, because it's very hard to collect data on heating and cooling globally, so it's a bit harder to be more categoric, but we have an estimate of about 110 gigawatts of geothermal use for heating and cooling. This includes geothermal heat pumps, and of this number, also including therefore geothermal heat pumps, Europe represents about a third, between 28 and 35 gigawatt thermal, depending on capacity assumptions for heat pump, notably. So we see here that Europe is a very, very important segment of the global geothermal heating and cooling supply chain. It represents a lot of the demand, and also we have a very strong industrial background to develop projects behind it. The global geothermal heating and cooling market, however, is very fragmented. It's much harder typically for companies to intervene globally compared to the electricity market, where we are seeing much more flows basically between the main geothermal countries. And it is also very much a function of local political, economic, and social factors that really determines how the markets are going to function. For instance, what we are seeing in China is in a very centralized political system and economic system as well. We have also a very fast-growing economy. Therefore, we are seeing greenfield cities that are really emerging from the ground and that are being built, for instance, around the use of geothermal for district heating, etc. Whereas, for instance, in the US, we have a very different framework where we have a country that is more on outdated type of infrastructure with a lot of dependence on fossils, for instance, for heating, so natural gas, this type of technologies. And we are seeing a much more bottom-up approach. So, for instance, for geothermal district heating in the US, the main drivers of development are more universities, which are more functioning as this type of more integrated local authorities. We are seeing the emergence of local heat planning at the level of, for instance, cities, etc. But it's still very much on the first step and not as advanced. So this local political reality is very important also to understand a market, especially looking at the competitiveness of a given technology there. Now, globally, what we're seeing as well is, as you could see in the first slide, where most of the geothermal electricity is located, so most of the high temperature geothermal resources are, it's high temperature countries for geothermal resource, but it's also high temperature countries for climate. So there's not as much of a need, for instance, for heat in district heating. What we are seeing, however, is that there's still a lot of needs for heat for processes, and notably processes in the agricultural or food treatment sector. So things like, for instance, drying, cheese making, beer making, whatever, or even greenhouses is very much used required, even in countries with a very warm climate. And this is driving also the integration of geothermal heating and cooling within local communities to provide this local economic value. And finally, that's a bit the main trend also that we are seeing on the global geothermal heating and cooling market, that cooling is a major driver of development, especially for geothermal heat pumps, but we are also seeing increasingly interest into absorption cooling from high temperature geothermal heat resources to produce coal out of them. So globally, these are also emerging as a priority. Before, we're in a context where hydrocarbons were very cheap, and there was not as much of a concern about the environmental footprint of heating and cooling. We are seeing, for instance, in China, a very rapid shift on this on the decarbonization of heat priority, notably with geothermal heat pumps and geothermal district heating in the case of our sector, which is notably around the challenge of efficiently use energy, because China is in a context of very rapidly growing energy needs, but also a need to really decrease its reliance on coal and especially outdated assets, which are very polluting, in the objective notably to reduce air pollution, which is creating a lot of local political tensions. North America, we are seeing the emergence of bans on fossil heating and cooling in buildings in local or state regulation. So this is not yet a mainstream national type of measures, but we have even states, like for instance, Washington State, where the city of Seattle is located, which are proposing this type of bans on fossil heating and cooling, which automatically will lead to a shift towards renewable solutions, like notably geothermal, and including so far more local shallow geothermal networks potentially, or even geothermal heat pumps. But we could also see the move towards more interest for geothermal district heating, notably around universities, but also around new neighborhoods, etc., etc. And finally, we also see a lot of interest in India, Latin America, and notably here, structured as a strategic need around cooling and the need to cool as efficiently as possible to avoid the stress on electricity grid, that are very much stressed when they are in period of summer cooling peaks. Just also, indeed, as I mentioned, geothermal for heating is very much a target of business with the aim of creating local value. So agricultural sector, industry, etc., are now looking at geothermal, especially in the context of very volatile and right now very high, with no sign of decrease, fossil fuel prices to create value for geothermal. We are also seeing a very important pull from the global geothermal markets from the lithium production from geothermal brines. This is especially true in the US and Europe, but it is also a bit creating interest in the technology a bit everywhere. This might also lead to higher profile of geothermal energy as a renewable resource, leading a bit as a spillover effect to more developments of other type of technologies. We're a bit late, so I'm not going into too much details, but just to show you that there's interest for geothermal lithium projects a bit everywhere. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for that presentation. That really nicely set the scene for today's discussions and gave a fantastic overview of the global geothermal market. So now we will have time for questions. So if you have any questions for Thomas, please pop them in the chat and I will review those.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think it doesn't look like we've got any questions at the moment. So if there aren't any, we will move to the next speaker, and we always have time for discussion at the end anyway. So if you do have any questions with Thomas, we can come back to those at the end of today's presentations. Okay, so we will move on then. So the next up we have presentation from Sergio from XG, looking at the competition in the global turbine market. So Sergio, I pass the floor to you.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I will share my screen.
Brilliant.
Yes, we can see your screen and hear you well.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Sergio Morlacchi. I am in charge of business development in Exergy. And today we would like to share with you our perspective about the geothermal market from the point of view of a technology provider like us. Before I will go through a quick introduction about who we are and what we do. Exergy is a technological provider company. We are expert in organic ranking cycle. We developed the full organic ranking cycle system, and within this system we have our own technology about the turbine, which have a specific arrangement, which is radial outflow. This arrangement with some patented solution that we have allowed us to have a quick grow in the market, in the geothermal market, and since 10 years, we are now a significant player with more than 500 megawatt electrical already installed in a fleet as our geothermal portfolio reference. So Exergy is all in all a full comprehensive engineering company. So we have, it is our duty to develop the ORC system and the turbine specifically for the needs of our customer. We are specifically developing it with a tailor-made approach with our engineering department in order to exploit as much as possible the efficiency of the resource available from our customer. We internalized also the manufacturing with the lean method in 2 different workshops, one in Italy and one in Turkey, where we do the assembly of our turbine and the testing of our turbine. We manage completely internally the full project with the project management department, and we have also an after-sale service department which take care of large services for the customer from the very beginning and the commissioning through trainings of operators, trainings of maintenance specialists, and overall maintenance service and on-call availability guarantee. That's what we do. Now going through the application, we have seen in the years and with our reference that the binary plant is a cost-effective configuration for the geothermal market. We see that for medium enthalpy and low enthalpy for sure, but also with higher enthalpy in these days is a superior efficiency and very cost-effective configuration in terms of business plan and capex opex analysis. Specifically for our turbine and our design with the single dish turbine with multiple pressure level plant design, we are high flexible in designing, and we can keep the efficiency higher even if off design comes during the operation of the lifetime of the plant. Our design is suitable for resource above 90 degrees C, and according to the configuration that we have on our turbine, we are registering very high availability, mainly due to the low maintenance activity that we need to do on the turbine itself. Now going through the competitiveness in the geothermal market, I would like to say that we have seen that there are 3 main challenging topics that we see when a possibility, an opportunity of development in geothermal comes. So the first, sorry, I am wrong with the slide. So the first is that during the development of a project, we have always an uncertainty of the resource. From the first bid from the first request for quotation of interest from a developer to the final bid and the final selection of the plant, we see that there is a lot of change in the expectation of the available resource in terms of temperature, in terms of flow, definitely in terms of enthalpy, and also in terms of operative condition of the resource, like pressurizing for the injection or availability to discharge CO2. This uncertainty gives to a developer and to the technology provider clearly the need to put some effort from the beginning of the opportunity. Then there is for sure the high cost associated with the exploration and drilling, which is much before in terms of cash flow, delivering the electrical output to the grid and getting revenues. So early exploration, early study, and first simulation, then test drilling, and then actual drilling to give the resource to the plant comes usually years before generating the electricity. So cash flow is for sure a big challenge in terms of developing a geothermal ERC opportunity, and this is very much associated to the difficulty to get the finance and to push this investment, which are still considered somehow risky over the financial boards and the investor boards. So specifically from our point of view as a technology provider, in trying to fulfill as much as possible the customer and developer request, we are facing this issue. The first is the uncertainty of project execution. So even if there is an uncertainty during the bidding phase and the commercial phase, we see that also during the project execution, there must be the flexibility to eventually adapt the plant according to conditions that are unexpected. This is connected with a very long time frame, which is sometimes not very much predictable, to get the contract signature and to set the condition to allow the detailed design of the plant and detailed design of the turbine, and eventually the procurement and the manufacturing. So these are specifically about the technology. Then about the commercial, we are facing some difficulty in foreseeing project pipeline. This means that there are single projects in very different parts of the world with very different commercial arrangement requested. So the difficulty is to find the best method to propose the technology with partnering with the right companies, with the specific collaborators or consultant, in order to develop the best proposition for the specific customer for the need that he has. Then there are some concerns which are now for the overall industry, but are still increasing the difficulties of the geothermal opportunity, which are geopolitically related, which is the rising cost of the raw materials in different parts of the world, in different supply chains of the world for different reasons. For example, the war that we have here in Europe, close to our borders, and the difficulty of the expediting and the logistic in some part of the world, especially in Asia Pacific, for example, for as still a COVID consequence, which is not opening the possibility to have the cost like before the COVID. Then our reaction, the XRG reaction to tackle this challenging, has been still in the last 2 years to improve the technology, to exploit the efficiency of our plant and especially of our turbine, with the new design and with new efficiency already delivered to our customer, which helps definitely to improve the business plan and to extend the possibility to have the geothermal opportunity approved by investor, to integrate the service for our customer as much as possible. Eventually, we are available to implement consultancy for the feed, consultancy for the financing, and to get the project including the EPC turnkey development. We are a technology provider. We have a strong focus in the technology, but we are really widening our services in order to help as much as possible customer and investor to get the project to the end. And we are also diversifying the supply chain and the vendor list in order to tackle specific unexpected problem that we are facing on these days in the supply chain and the operation market. Following some reference of us, this is the very last reference list. We have more than 500 megawatt, much of them in the geothermal, 470 for the moment. With the last project that we commissioned in 2022, which is a specific application as brine recovery. It is in Philippines with the Energy Development Corporation as a customer. I would say that these have been a successful project with very nice performance, and through the year 2020 and 2021, in any case, smooth operation process completed toward the customer. I finished my presentation. I would like to thank you for listening, and I'm available for any question if there are from anyone.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your presentation, Sergio. It was really interesting to hear your unique perspectives as a power plant technology provider, and how you're addressing some of these current challenges within our sector. So if anybody in the audience has any questions for Sergio, please pop them in the chat now, and I will review these and we can get the answers from Sergio. Okay, so one coming in from Lorraine. So where do you develop most of your ORC projects, and in which parts of Europe?
Actually, we have our ORC project in Europe, in Turkey, in Middle East, and now we are working a lot in Asia Pacific with the last 3 deliveries there. But we are for sure able and willing to work abroad all over the world. There is no restriction in terms of geographical possibilities.
Great, thank you. Brilliant. So another question in the chat from Victor, asking whether you may be interested in a project in Romania, a partnership for a project in Romania.
Of course, yes. Please, Victor, to contact me, and we can speak about it.
Great. And another question here. So what is your share within the global market, the share of the global market?
I mean, in terms of megawatt and fleet already installed, we are the second ORC player in the geothermal market. So I would say that we are the second. That's my reply.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions.
Please.
Do you think much more R&D needs to be done to get ORCs cheaper and more efficient, or is this technology fully mature? And the second part to this question, what opportunities do you see to get your part of the value chain more competitive?
ORC is a mature technology in terms of availability and reliability. So technology is obviously full commercial grade with a large number of applications already installed in different conditions and environment. but there is still improvement to be done. We have our own internal research and development department, and I see that even the last project of us has been delivered with efficiency of the turbine, which is the best for us. So almost every design can be improved. How we are improving our design, and we reach the maximum in the last one. It will not be the maximum long lasting. We will improve again. I believe that we believe that there is improvement to be done in the ORC technology for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sergio. So we have a couple more questions, but I think we may need to move on to the next presentation now. So what we'll do is I'll collate these, and if we have time in the discussion, we can come back to it. If not, we can pass these to each of the presenters, and they can get back to you with answers. Okay. Right. So moving on, we next have Michelle Ramirez from IRENA, presenting the geothermal energy globally, the Global Geothermal Alliance perspective. So I pass the floor to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the International Renewable Energy Agency, I would like to thank you, the organizers, for the invitation to participate in this panel today. Participants, we are pleased to be here with you this session and provide this quick presentation on our work and why do we think that geothermal is competitive at the global level. First, I will introduce the GGA. It was launched at COP21 and serves as a platform for dialogue, cooperation, and coordinated action between the geothermal industry, policymakers, and stakeholders worldwide. The GGA is a coalition for action to increase the use of geothermal energy, both in power generation and direct use of heat. It calls on government, businesses, and other stakeholders to support the deployment of realizable geothermal potential. The Alliance has an aspirational goal to achieve a 5-fold growth in the installed capacity for geothermal power generation and more than 3-fold growth in geothermal heating, both by 2030. And this goal was updated, this last goal on heating was updated last year through an energy compact. And the GGA is designed to foster an enabling environment to attract investments in geothermal energy and to provide customized support to regions and countries with geothermal market potential, as well as to facilitate the exchange of insights and experience among key stakeholders in the geothermal energy value chain, and to identify and promote models of sharing and mitigation risk to attract private investments and integrate geothermal facilities into energy markets. And also to help outreach efforts to give geothermal energy a greater visibility in the global energy and climate debates. The first high-level conference of the Global Geothermal Alliance took place in 2017 in Florence, Italy. And the meeting was attended by 230 high-level public, intergovernmental, non-governmental, and senior private sector representatives. And the outcome of this meeting was a Florence Declaration in which governments reaffirmed their commitment to work together to identify and implement measures that will significantly increase the speed of geothermal energy development around the world. And we are planning to host another high-level conference this year. This will be held in El Salvador, if the sanitary situations allow us to physically meet. We have an action plan, which was endorsed by our members and partners in May 2016. This action plan was set to coordinate closely with existing structures, programs, and facilities that share the common objective of promoting geothermal energy deployment at the international, regional, and national level. And the first priority areas aim to map geothermal resources and identify existing and potential geothermal markets and near-term projects in the pipeline. The second one is aimed to scope the need for assistance in removing policy, regulatory, funding, or capacity building obstacles. The third one is aimed to support the development of effective enabling frameworks associated to mechanisms to achieve national objectives of geothermal energy deployment. And finally, fourth area, it's aimed to establish and improving a robust global network of geothermal energy experts, building upon the existing networks. Nowadays, the Global Geothermal Alliance has 50 member countries and 54 partner institutions. Yeah, so that is the Global Geothermal Alliance. So now I think we should talk why do we think geothermal energy is truly competitive? Well, first, geothermal energy is a clean and abundant energy source. Today, there are more than 15 gigawatts of installed geothermal power plants globally. While it is estimated that there is a global technical potential as high as 200 gigawatts of geothermal electric power only from hydrothermal systems. On the other hand, geothermal heating and cooling installations have grown over 100 gigawatts, while its potential is estimated at 5,000 gigawatts globally. And geothermal is also a sustainable energy option. Geothermal power plants do not rely on burning fossil fuels, but instead directly harness the energy stored on the ground. As such, geothermal power plants produce negligible emissions related to greenhouse gases during their operation. In fact, binary power plants have the potential to generate power with zero emissions in the case of 100% reinjection, making this technology completely emission-free. Moreover, if full life cycle emissions are calculated, it's estimated that a geothermal binary power plant is one of the most favorable technologies with 11 grams of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilowatt hour. And geothermal is also a reliable, flexible, and resilient energy supply. In diverse metrics, as are in the US, as such in Nevada, geothermal power plants provide baseload power with an average capacity factor above 80%. And another key feature of geothermal plants is their ability to provide flexibility to power systems, facilitating the integration of intermittent sources such as solar or wind. And when the power from intermittent sources varies through the day due to changes in weather, geothermal power plants can ramp up and down multiple times a day to balance the supply and demand for electricity in the grid. Geothermal plants can also provide fair baseload generation and reliable reserves that are not exposed to price volatility like fossil fuels. And the reliability of geothermal energy is also associated with its high resiliency to climate events, such as strong winds or periods of drought, which are becoming more frequent and intense with the effects of climate change. And it also makes economic sense. The operation and maintenance cost of geothermal power plants are estimated around 150 kilowatts per year. And they remain stable in time and not depend on fossil supply, resulting in an average levelized energy cost of 7 cents per kilowatt hour, which falls within the lower band of fossil fuel generation and is competitive with other renewable energy options. And finally, I would like to highlight that according with the US Energy Information Administration, generation of power from geothermal resources will result in an avoid cost to the system of around $40 per megawatt hour. And as it was previously mentioned, geothermal is more than power for transition, for a just transition. Geothermal power plants are vectors for economic development in regions where they are built. In 2020, about 96,000 people were employed in the geothermal industry worldwide. And the impact of a geothermal power plant goes further than power generation, as the heat can be used in multiple direct activities linked in a cascade scheme to the operation of the plant. These include building heating system, greenhouses, or food processing, aquaculture, and other applications. In Kenya, geothermal energy has allowed the development of a flourishing flower cultivation by using geothermal greenhouses. Energy consumption costs have been reduced by 30%, and flower exports increased by 10%. In Mexico, a fruit dehydrator plant processes 3 tons of fruit a day, providing a business opportunity for local communities, and they also contribute to the food security of the area. Geothermal energy can also be seen as an investment opportunity for the indigenous communities of New Zealand, where the Maori-owned power plant provides a revenue of more than $4 million, which are redirected to community programs. In Iceland, the 9 companies located in the geothermal resource plant that uses excess byproducts of geothermal generated a combined income of 1% of the Icelandic GDP since 2013. And geothermal energy could also be an opportunity for hydrocarbon industry to explore cleaner businesses and cleaner opportunities, particularly for drilling service companies where similar technologies and expertise are needed. In 2021, in Colombia, the first pilot of a geothermal power plant is generating power from the heat of oil wells, which shows the opportunity of exploiting this existent structure. And it's a technology looking toward the future. Geothermal technology is a well-established and proven technology, as Sergio already mentioned. And nevertheless, in recent years, there have been some technical breakouts in depth and of the heat and permeability of the terrain. And enhanced geothermal systems have the potential to make geothermal energy available in areas of the globe without natural volcanic activity. And geothermal may also be a promising technology to produce green hydrogen, and in fields which temperatures are about 200 Celsius degrees at competitive prices. The possibility is already being tested in New Zealand, in Iceland, and in Australia. There are plans to test the production of green hydrogen by installing an electrolyzer powered by geothermal. In addition, extraction of minerals such as lithium from geothermal brines could power the energy transition by supporting the production of batteries for energy storage and electric vehicles in a more environmentally sustainable manner, as is already demonstrated in Germany, New Zealand, the UK, and the US. So what needs to be done? Collaborate. Collaboration could benefit various aspects of geothermal development and could include sharing experiences and best practices in establishing enabling frameworks, innovation, research, and development, capacity building, and outreach, the impactful messaging. The collaboration among stakeholders is required to accelerate the development of geothermal energy globally by leveraging their collective synergies. And these stakeholders include government agencies, private sector players, international development agencies, financiers, and academia. And in addition, the geothermal sector should collaborate with other relevant industries, including the oil and gas sector for technology transfer, as well as with end-use sectors to promote geothermal utilization in sectors such as agri-food and other industries. And that is the importance of the Global Geothermal Alliance, which, as I told you before, it's a platform for dialogue and to establish this cooperation and coordinate action. Well, that's what I had prepared to talk about why we think geothermal is competitive. Now, I just would like to invite all of you to download this, our most recent publication on powering agri-food value chain with geothermal heat. As you know, the worldwide deployment of renewable energy has seen significant growth over the last decade, driven by increasing awareness of impacts of climate change, associated need to reduce fossil fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. And the demand of food and water is expected to grow 50%, putting pressure on existing water, energy, and food systems. So scaling up investments in renewable energy technologies in agriculture and food systems is critical for the success of the global energy transition. And there are many opportunities for clean energy technologies to support food production and drying, cooling, storage, transport, and distribution. Jet energy used in agriculture and food still relies heavily on fossil fuels. So in this context, the growth in renewable energy, including geothermal energy, has predominantly centered around the power sector. However, there is significant potential for using geothermal energy in other end-use sectors through direct use applications. This is particularly true for the agri-food industries, where geothermal can support greater sustainability in food production. Geothermal can be used to regulate temperature and humidity to create the optimal environment for the cultivation of produce. In post-harvest preservation of produce, geothermal energy can be used to support drying, dehydration, cooling, and cold storage to minimize spoilage, and can be also used to increase the productivity of different applications, such as greenhouse heating, aquaculture, and food processing, among other forms of value addition. And further adoption of direct use application will be instrumental in supporting the global energy transition and achieving long-term sustainable development goals. Of course, we have challenges hindering the use of geothermal energy in agri-food applications, such as inadequate data on geothermal resources and existing demand absent or misaligned enabling frameworks, inadequate financing, and lack of awareness, among others. This guide would provide as well some recommendations for policymakers on the measures that can be implemented to address these challenges and lead to a higher uptake of geothermal energy within the agri-food sector. And yeah, well, our upcoming activities, as I already told you, we have a high-level conference in El Salvador. We are also working on developing a strategic heating and cooling plan for Mongolia. We are working as well developing this global market and technology assessment. And we are working on a new implementation plan for the GGA to update the priority action areas that I previously mentioned. And I hope you enjoy this quick presentation. Thank you once again to the organizers, and I remain available if you have any question.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for your comprehensive overview of geothermal energy globally, and particularly great to see the geothermal applications other than power production highlighted there, including the applications for geothermal in agri-food and your policy guidebook that's just been released. Brilliant. Okay, so I think due to time, I think we'll move straight on to Gabor Gardi's presentation of the competitiveness synergies with GEE. So Gabor, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Madeleine. I hope you hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I am Gabor Gerdi from CAPES, which is the cluster of applied earth sciences in Hungary. And we are with the GE from the beginning. In the second phase of the project, our task was to create a tool that would allow the meta-cluster members to find potential partners for their work and projects. The main points were it should be fast and user-friendly, and I guess we could manage this. We developed a new database and filled it with information last year about the members of the GE. We took data which are public from websites and social media pages. And I will show you how it works shortly. I will share my screen.
We can
see?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so I logged in as a member into the GeoCollab database. We can see the search fields here. We can search between the members and the projects that are in the database. Here we can see all the members of the GE. Currently, it says it's 639. I hope it's accurate. We can scroll down and browse them, and if we find something interesting, we click on it, and we will see all the informations about the company. Which cluster member is it, the homepage, the social media sites, and descriptions, products and services. What's the type of the company, the position in the value chain, the scope of activities, and of course the cooperations that we could find in the internet. We can see these are the companies they are related to out of the GE metacluster. And if they're available, we can see the inside the metacluster cooperations, of course. We can see its references and all other data. These in the search field we can use free keywords to search for example, I will search for a laboratory partner. I just type in laboratory and press the search, and the database will give me the results, 82 companies who are related to laboratory. If I'm more specific, for example, I type porosity into the field, I have only 7 results, so it's more easy to find a partner within the 7 results. Okay, it's the same with the projects. Last year we find 804 projects on the web sites of the members, and all the data we collected into the database also. Here I can also pick one and see who was the project leader, who were the partners, and what's the summary of the project, what happened, and if there's a homepage of the project, then we can visit with just a single click also. We can also search with keywords. For example, as the last presentation said, agri-food, we have 2 results for agri-food projects from last year, which we could find. So that's the main thing. We can also see the map here and choose from the pins. If I'm searching for a partner from Italy, I can just zoom in and click on them. We have a statistics that's under construction still, but we will be able to see the movement inside the database. But some data for your interest, we have more than 600 G members. In the database, there are more than 2,700 out of G companies. The number of cooperations within the G is more than 3,000. Out of the G is almost 2,000 currently. So I guess that's a good place to start to search for the partners. Currently it's for the G members, but with some development we can open it for external users to be able to find partners within our members. So that was it shortly. Thank you for your attention, and if you have some questions, then feel free to ask me. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Gabor. That looks like a fantastic tool. Okay, so I think we'll now move on to a discussion. So we've got a couple of unanswered questions that we can start with, but if anybody has any questions, please pop them in the Q&A or the chat and I will monitor those. Okay, so to kick off, I think we'll come back to a couple of questions that were for Thomas. So firstly, Thomas, how do you see the shallow geothermal market in comparison to deep geothermal market?
Yeah, thanks, Madeleine. So overall, it's very hard to collect data on especially the shallow one. What we know is broadly it represents a much bigger amount of especially energy capacity in terms of thermal capacity. And the main areas for use of geothermal heat pumps are really so Europe, as we know, but we are seeing also a lot of developments in East Asia, notably. So China is really installing a lot of this technology. It is now emerging a bit in Japan as well. And then North America is the other main area where they are quite widespread. In this case, mostly also in individual houses. But what we are seeing also globally in the geothermal, shallow geothermal market is really also kind of a global trend towards large, shallow geothermal systems, also looking more of things like underground thermal energy storage, etc. So, yeah, I mean, we are seeing something of a convergence, basically, globally in the type of services that are expected of geothermal. And indeed, cooling here is also obviously a very important aspect. District heating is, much more localized globally. So there's application, notably in the agricultural sector. Typically, it's much more punctual compared to the shallow geothermal, which is still very diffuse in the global economy, but much more widespread.
Great, thank you very much. So one more question for you, Thomas. What are your likely geothermal power predictions for 2030 and 2050?
Yeah. So that's a bit obviously hard to identify with a lot of certainty. What we know is that especially for geothermal power, we are now at a moment, and this could change, but we are at a moment where there is a lot of interest for this resource. Typically, if we take the case of the Western United States, where a lot of the global capacity is currently installed, there is very, very strong interest for geothermal as an anchor for the reliability of the grid. So there's a lot of new investments happening, a lot of very strong interest. All throughout the Americas, actually, we are seeing a very strong interest for geothermal power production. There's very ambitious plans in Chile. Colombia is looking also at the resource. Within the scope of these projects, we're also looking at Costa Rica, where there's a lot of interest, and throughout the whole of Central America. And then Mexico, over the past few years, maybe there's been a bit of a hiatus on the planned trajectory for developing geothermal power. There's a lot of potential interest. And then on the other side of the Pacific Ring, we are also seeing very, very strong plans. New Zealand is continuing to intensify its uses. Japan as well as more ambitious plans. So Japan, we know there's also the question of the conflicting use with onsen thermal sources, etc. But overall, it's also planning to expand. Indonesia is continuing to develop very heavily geothermal power. And what we are seeing is also that the broader rift region, provided it remains relatively stable, is also with very, very ambitious plans to develop geothermal for electrification and for local economic development. So there's been some plans currently in development in Ethiopia. There's plans in Uganda. There's discussions also with countries like Eritrea, etc. But this indeed is maybe a bit more uncertain, but we are expecting indeed that towards 2030, there would be a renewed growth, and we could expect even the multiplication of the total capacity installed globally by 2050 for sure.
Great, thank you very much, Thomas. Sounding really positive. Okay, so we have a couple of questions here directed, I believe, to Sergio. So we'll start. start here. So one question, how big a part will permanent magnet motors, electrical submersible pumps play in the saving of costs in the geothermal market? Sergio, I think this was directed to you. Do you want to take this one? I'm not sure if we've got Sergio, your mic might be muted. Okay, we may have lost Sergio, no problem. Would anybody else like to take this question? Or else we can move on. Okay, I think we've got Sergio is coming back.
Yeah, I'm here.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so
Sorry, can you come back with the question? I didn't get it.
yes, I'll repeat the question. So somebody's asked, how big a part will permanent magnet motors, electrical submersible pumps play in the saving of costs in the geothermal market?
But I think maybe Sergio, if this is very specific, but
Yeah.
if you have also a perspective on from your view as also a technology provider, etc., what are a bit the main innovations that are upcoming and that you feel will be very key in cutting costs, especially for things like manufacturing, but overall also the cost of equipment, etc. Okay. I think we lost Sergio, unfortunately.
Okay,
But I think Luca Zotto was saying that he could answer that in the chat. So I will give you the floor, Luca, if you want to.
Yes, thanks, Thomas. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I can take the question. Anyway, it's not specific on the ORC technology, which is Exergy's technology. So I would speak as a consultant, which is more general. Let's say in the European market, especially where the ESP are fundamental if you want to do a full liquid pressurized flow of geothermal brine. This is a very, very key element of the power plant. So yes, any evolution on the ESP pumps is key for the development of this kind of market. It's less important for other markets where also long shaft pumps can be applied, or let's say the temperatures are quite low. But obviously, yes, this is a very important driver for the market.
brilliant. Thank you very much, Luca, for taking that question. So we do have a few more questions for Exergy, but I believe we've come to the end of our webinar today. We've run out of time a little bit, so I think we will close the session today. And any remaining questions I will send to the relevant speaker, and we'll get those answered for you. I realised my camera's off. So thank you very much for joining us today. And yes, enjoy the rest of your day. We'll end the session there.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining. Bye.